What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel, and today I got something a little bit different. I'm inundated via private message and email and all other manner of communication on if you should do a COYOTE swap. Basically, you as someone who's watching the video and kind of on the fence, you've got a Fox or you've got a new Edge or an SN95, something like that, and you're wanting to know the gory details from me because I'm doing this right now, and so I wanted to take a little time out from the build and just go through some of the things, like basically the top 5 things that I was not expecting when I got started with this build, that's going to help you be better prepared and better understand what it takes to get a COYOTE in a Fox body Mustang, or really any Mustang for that matter. So that's what we're going to cover today. Let's go. Okay, guys, so getting back to the subject at hand, and I know there's going to be a lot of talking, but I'm going to have some cutscenes kind of, illustrate what I'm talking about. When I first got into the COYOTE swap, I thought I had quite a few things, pretty much figured out as far as the build goes, and, I was ready to pull the trigger. I had done a ton of research, pricing, and all this other stuff, and I went in and I felt confident. I felt good, and so pulled the trigger, yanked the engine, all that. So the first thing that I really was not expecting was the engine bay. And, this is not something that you have to do. The engine bay is not something you have to do. But smoothing the engine bay while the engine was out, obviously, made a lot of sense. You can go back and do it later, but, for me, it just made sense at that point in time just to go ahead and do the engine bay. Now, there was a lot of work involved. There was a lot of money involved. Time, all this other stuff. At the end of the day, it was worth it. But from the get-go, I simply was not expecting to do that, and I did do that. So that's something you need to consider before you start off. All right, so let's kind of move on to number 2. And number 2, when you consider my Mustang, my Fox 92LX, it had quite a bit of modifications, heads, cam, intake, all the supporting mods, all of that, some suspension stuff, but my brakes were stock. And if you know anything about a Fox body, you know that Fox body brakes are trash. They're beyond trash. They're totally inadequate for basically the stock power level. So you got drums in the back, you got, they're 10 or 10 and a half in the front, something like that. They're totally inadequate. And that is another thing that I kind of overlooked. I had it in the back of my mind. At some point, I was going to upgrade the brakes, and that was kind of when I had time. But putting the COYOTE in the car, basically added another 120 to 140 horsepower, depending on what the dyno numbers say when we take the car to get tuned. And it's totally just stupid to drive around in a car with that much power on stock brakes. Is just asking for you to basically wreck the car you just spent a ton of money to build and that you love so much. You got all the time and effort and everything in it, only to not be able to stop because the car is so freaking fast and the brakes are totally inadequate. So that's another thing that kind of hit me in the face, that I said, okay, it's now. I have to do this now because I'm not stacking up this car I just got done building. All right, so point number 3 is, so you've got your COYOTE, what are you going to put behind it? Because that is a major question. There's a lot of details that go in, and a lot of thought, quite frankly, that go into that. Now, from the get-go, I knew that my car was going to be a stick. Now, you may want an auto, you may want a stick, but here's the thing. It isn't really that simple. So if you're going to run a manual, what manual trans are you going to run? Are you going to buy a T56? Are you going to do a 6060? Are you going to do an MT82? What are you going to do? Because number 1, it's got to be strong, and number 2, it's got to have the bell housing that mates up to a modular engine. Just for example, like the QuickTime bell housing to mate a manual trans like a Tremec or something like that to a modular engine, you're looking at almost $700. So it's not going to be cheap, and that doesn't include the trans. Obviously, you still have to buy the transmission. Say you've got a 3550 or something already, you're still going to have to buy that. So, okay, on the flip side, if you're going to do automatic, the 6R80 is a 6-speed, bolts right up, it's freaking awesome. However, you have to buy the control pack to run that, which is more pricey than the stick shift control pack. You have to figure that out, and you have to be aware of those costs on the front end, and all the details to actually make it work. And then we'll go one step further, the drive shaft. If you're running a 6R80, you're going to have a custom drive shaft. So again, that's more money, more cost, and more thought that you need to put into your build before you pull the trigger and say, let's yank everything out and drop this Coyote in. Okay, guys, so number 4 on my top 5 you need to know for you Coyote swap list is tuning. A lot of people may be under the impression that you get the control pack, you plug it up, and you're good to go, and that's simply not the case. Even if you use the stock airbox and everything that comes with the control pack, you still have headers and everything else on your car, so the tune is not going to be right. You do have to have the car tuned. There's several different ways you can do it. You can do it by a mail order tune. You can take it to a dyno and have it actually put on the dyno and tune that way. But regardless, you're going to spend some money, and it's going to take some time. The car is not just going to fire off and be 100% the second that you that you get the car running. So that's another added expense. That's more time that you got to take into account when you're doing your Coyote swap. Tuning is a must. Not just for max power, but also for drivability. You want the car to run right. You don't want it to stall or run rich or run lean or anything like that. So when you are considering this, make sure you put in the budget. You got to have the car tuned. All right, number 5. And again, this is just my top 5. This is not everything. So yeah, make sure you do your homework. My last and final point is the engine itself. And there are a lot of options, especially now that the 2018s are out. There's no less than 3 generations of Coyote engines. You got the Gen 1, which is what I've got. Okay, and we're going to sub off of that, and there's a Mustang and a truck engine for Gen 1. There's a Mustang and a truck engine for Gen 2, as well as Gen 3. Being that the Gen 3 motors are brand new, I'm not really going to get into that because, it's not really very relevant at this point. The Gen 2 motors are stronger, they make more power. However, the Gen 1 engines are a lot cheaper, they're a lot more accessible, and they still make gobs of horsepower. So, you need to decide based on your budget and what you want out of the car, and maybe they align, maybe they don't, meaning that, if you want to get, 475 horsepower out of your NA Coyote, then you're going to naturally have to have a Gen 2. Or you're going to have to mod the crap out of a Gen 1 engine. The truck engines are good. They're the cheapest, but to get max power, you're going to have to swap the cams. There's a lot of little things. So you have to be educated on the engines themselves. They have to be in line with your budget. And, there's absolutely no shame in saying, starting off with a truck engine like what I'm doing. I did swap the Mustang cams. And then, once the car's done and running and all that, and you kind of recover from the massive hit to the wallet, you swap to the Gen 2 engine, which is what I'm planning to do. Maybe boost, whatever you want to do. So before you get all crazy and start doing, yanking your car apart, consider the different engines, consider the budget. The crate motors are like $7-8 grand. They're expensive, but you can get a truck motor for $2,000, $2,500. So make sure you know what you're getting into as far as the engine goes, and you'll love your swap. All right, guys, so there you have it. That is a very good basis of some of the things you need to get into before you actually start tearing your I say Fox body, whatever you're swapping to put a Coyote in. Those are just some of the things you need to consider, and some of the things that, that I thought I had kind of figured out, but I didn't, and some things that I absolutely didn't even plan for. So, and you got to do this, or, you're going to do a couple of things. You're going to end up quitting and not doing the swap at all. You're going to get halfway through and sell the car. I see it every day all over social media and stuff like that, where people just, they give up because they weren't prepared. I want you to be prepared. I want you to know what you're getting into. If you want some more information, go back and watch all the other videos on the channel. I've done everything kind of in sequence as I went through the build, so go back and check those out. Feel free to shoot me an email. Email's always in the description. And happy swapping. Later, guys.